I'm really, really excited today because we have the amazing Angela Kelly joining us to speak about the fantastic With Women in Mind initiative that is currently going on at Mind, which is a UK, one of the leading UK mental health charities focused on supporting young people. And with Women in Mind is an inspiring collective of supporters helping women and young people most affected by trauma. Their aim is to raise 2.5 million over the next 3 years to help reach 100,000 young people most affected by trauma. And Angela is a senior philanthropy manager at Mind and is the lead on this project and is here today to share about why it got started and what they're doing to engage more women in philanthropy and in their organization. So thank you so much for joining us today, Angela.
Thank you, Alex. I'm so excited to be here, and it's a brilliant opportunity to talk about the work that we've been doing at Mind and the work that you've been doing as well. I know you've done a few of these podcasts, and I think the more of this that puts women and women in philanthropy on the map is a fantastic thing. So huge well done to you as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So we had a chance to kind of catch up before, and I was really interested to learn about your background with women in philanthropy. The reason we set up this podcast is because it felt like in the UK there isn't a huge kind of conversation happening around women in philanthropy. It's happening really in segmented kind of pockets. And I wanted to just create a platform where people could find out about what was going on. So when we had a chat, I was interested to hear about your background because this isn't your first time kind of focusing on diverse communities within philanthropy. So can you start by just sharing a bit about who you are, what your background is, and how you kind of landed in this role leading this great initiative?
Yeah, sure. Prior to taking on the role at Mind, which I've been at Mind now just over 2.5 years, I was at Macmillan Cancer Support, and I've been in the third sector about 15 years now. But at Macmillan Cancer, I was predominantly working on corporate partnerships, and at that point, I was at Macmillan for 5 years. We weren't reaching our market share of philanthropy, for a huge organisation like Macmillan Cancer. And when I was working on some of the corporate partnerships, I was working with some high profile ones, such as Harvey Nicks, was one of the accounts that I was looking after. And it made sense to work with the philanthropy team. And I'd approached the director there to say that, there's some ways that we can work together. Obviously, we've got a target audience there. So he was kind of excited about some of the ideas that I had. And between what was then the corporate team, some of the major donors that I'd brought on board in the role that I had there, we decided that maybe we could launch an initiative called Women of Influence, which we launched at the House of Lords. So that was back in 2018, I think, when we did that first launch. And basically it was quite an informal, community of women, and it was just women then that we did at Macmillan that we brought together. We had an all-female exec board at Macmillan. Linda Thomas was the CEO then, and the exec team as well, who we brought on board, also Claire Rowney at the time. So we had a great female leadership who were able to talk about their leadership stories at the House of Lords, which meant then, again, was really inspiring to the type of women that we wanted to come on board for philanthropy. So that was really, I guess, the beginnings of me working with women, with predominantly female major donors. And yeah, so it was really exciting. Again, it really appealed to the women that we were speaking to. The prospects, anybody who, in particular, had been on individual pipelines for a number of years. Again, when we had a good product and we were able to reach out to them in order to, to cultivate those relationships, it worked really well. And so we did that for 2 years, and then I had the opportunity. Obviously, we all went into lockdown, and so some of those events turned into online events. But the opportunity came to work at Mind, and I found it really appealing when a recruiter reached out to me, because I knew they were launching a young women in trauma program at the time, so the very beginning stages of that. And I knew then potentially there was a way in with, again, bringing another community of, at that time, we just thought, of women together. And they wanted to build their philanthropy program, as who doesn't in any, philanthropy team and stuff. And I also knew we had again, it was really the early stages of that. We'd had an anonymous donor come forward who was going to be doing a garden for us at Chelsea Flower Show. So we potentially had a really good event where we could almost launch this initiative. At that point, we didn't have a name. It really was the early stages because I was just literally interviewing. But I had some ideas that I shared at the interview, and they were really excited, and hence me getting the role. So we started off and literally hit the ground running, and we had this event at Chelsea, which are the beginning stages, the planning stages were happening at that point. I pitched my idea into the board of trustees, and again, it's something like, one of the things I guess within philanthropy, we're almost product poor. We haven't got kind of all of the gimmicks that you have across other income streams, with I don't know, with IG or public fundraising. And so something like a giving circle or bringing together a collective is a really good way to engage major donors. So it made sense that we could do this. And again, we were just really just mapping out what that might look like. But we knew we had to jump on the opportunity at Chelsea Flower Show. So I also knew, again, in order to make something like this work really well, there were key components that we needed to have on board an investment from, and one of those mainly being from the senior leadership and also from the board of trustees. So I pitched this idea in that I want to bring this community of potential, female funders together, spoke to our chair and a couple of other trustees, and they were, couldn't have been more invested. They loved the idea. And of course, we needed them to open up their networks when something like this works really well. And they couldn't have been more on board, and they agreed to spearhead the initiative. So we got buy-in from the board. A few months later, we had a new CEO come into post as well. So Dr. Sarah Hughes. So and she was just perfect for this kind of initiative as well. So it was really, really exciting. And so we did a soft launch at Chelsea Flower Show, which is probably, coming up to 2 years now.
Okay.
And so it was really exciting. So that was the beginning of me, of the With Women in Mind collective, which it is now called.
So the individual who was involved with the Chelsea show concept, was that a woman philanthropist who was already involved in Mind?
No, it wasn't actually. We had it was something called Project Giving Back, and it's based on like trying to make sure that that Chelsea Flower shows can be quite an elite. Well, it is an elite event. Obviously, it's really well known, but it's like bringing, I guess, horticulture and that, people to enjoy the outdoors. And there was a real connection there with well-being. Again, this is all post-COVID as well, and then bringing it out to the masses. And we had a designer called Andy Sturgeon, who is, again, a bit of a rock star within the Chelsea Flower Show, who'd won numerous gold medals. And he agreed to come back to Chelsea Flower Show to design this garden with Project Giving Back, on the basis that he would do it to support Mind, because he had his own story and his own lived experience. So again, we were really fortuitous in how things lined up for us and worked out really well. So we met with Andy, we met obviously with Project Giving Back. And then at Chelsea Flower Show, you're given the opportunity, so you can have a number of nights while the flower show is running, to do champagne receptions. And we also have something like VIP breakfast in the morning as well. So we use the breakfast as an opportunity, because predominantly the networks that were being opened up to us from the board of trustees and the executive, were business women. So it was a nice event to come to. It was obviously very early in the morning, but it meant that we could still talk to them about why we were bringing this community of women together. And which is what we did. So the chair of the board, Stevie Spring, and 2 of the trustees hosted 3 tables at the breakfast at Chelsea Flower Show. And we had some amazing women there from the arts, from politics, from business. And we spoke mainly at that point because it was a soft launch, and we wanted to gather momentum and build that community, was just to talk about and highlight the need. And one of our strategic focuses within Mind is around young women and trauma. And like I say, we were at the early stages of launching that program. So it was just really kind of touch points, just planting the seed and stuff, and just slowly to bring that community together.
So yeah, that's helpful. Thank you for kind of clarifying that. So it was really used as kind of an anchor event to kind of attract a certain audience who might be interested in kind of attending that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this was new for mine, don't forget as well. So, mine it's we are the leading mental health charity, but it's fairly, like, in comparison to Macmillan, for example, it's a smaller charity. So, it was kind of groundbreaking to think of, like, how we're going to launch this Giving Circle. And we
Mm,
weren't calling it that. We were really
yeah.
just like testing the water, and could
Okay.
we really bring these women together? So
Yeah.
it was a perfect opportunity, especially looking back in reflection.
And what did you guys do then after that, as far as after you had that kind of soft launch with bringing these kind of women together? What were the kind of next steps that you took as far as, I guess, figuring out whether those women were interested and whether they kind of wanted to be involved in maybe a more formalized group?
I mean, what happened very quickly was that the more women that I was speaking to, and what happened, so our plans then at that point, even though we didn't share it at the soft launch, was we were going to do a hard launch. We wanted to do an official launch of the With Women in Mind, which was the name that we ended up, in
Hmm.
fact, our chairman of the board, Stevie Spring, came up with Women in Mind Collective, is what we called it. And we wanted to do a public launch and a hard launch, if you like, as well. And again, we wanted to make sure that we were kind of had basically prospects as well.
Hmm.
We didn't want to just
Hmm.
launch something and have no people like attend. So
Yeah.
we knew we needed to build some warm relationships. We needed to get all those, as I've mentioned before about the networks being open, for me to build warm relationships. And what became very clear, I think, from early on was the Young Women and Trauma program. We were talking and highlighting the need, and for the support that was needed for that nearly every woman, and since then, actually, because it's open to all genders now, and we have lots of male allies who've come on board, is that there wasn't a single person who I didn't speak to who couldn't identify in some way around you. The minute you started talking about, and again, like for us, in terms of, like, what does trauma mean, or trauma informed, it's self-identifying. So it can be even, with a small t or a capital T. It
Hmm.
depends on what trauma is to you. So, I could talk to women who their trauma could be coming back to work, going back into the workplace after having a baby, and the traumatic process that is. It could be some horrific abuse that could have happened to them when they were younger, or family members, or, so there wasn't a person who didn't relate to this. And like with all good, relationship building, when you create a place of safety and trust and psychological safety as well, so people can open up and be vulnerable, and the layers start to come off. I think this is where it gave me the opportunity, and has done since, really, over the last 2 years, to build some really, really amazing, meaningful relationships with the members of the collective, who are so invested, who are so passionate, and who now are so close to the cause. And obviously we had the, as I was going to say, advantage, but it's true, I guess, where mental health was everywhere. Everybody was talking about mental health. It was the narrative, obviously, during lockdown. We couldn't help but talk about it. So we were in a fortunate position as Mind in itself, as an organization, as a charity. But particularly, there were lots of organizations where I think, particularly around women who, whether it be domestic abuse or any other abuse, lots of charities and organisations were being approached during lockdown, obviously for the reasons that were very public at the time,
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
locked in the home, younger people, and suicide rates in young women were rocketing, self-harm were rocketing as well. And we knew as an organisation, hence why it was our strategic focus, we had to do something. So and yeah, and so all the members of the collective, they had their stories and that they were identifying. So yeah, it's worked really, really well. And I mean, that's one of the most inspiring things, and really what makes my job so enjoyable and rewarding is talking to these individuals, and also the youth consultants, because the any programs that we do at Mind is co-designed with youth consultants, so people with lived experience. There's no point, and I think this is fairly commonplace across the sector now, that lived experience is at the heart of everything, and it is obviously here at Mind as well. So we've had youth consultants involved at every stage of this as well, not just in designing the program, but also in speaking to potential, some people of the members of the collective as well. So they're getting right to the heart of why this program is needed, the impact that it has on those individuals, and ultimately the lives that they're saving as well, or certainly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. So can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of group in its current form then? So how did you, I guess, move it into kind of that philanthropy ask? What is the proposition that you're putting out there? And what can you tell me a little bit about, who's involved? How many people are kind of part of this collective at the moment?
Yeah, so over that 18-month period, so perhaps it's helpful if I just, so we did get to the stage where we did our official launch. So we did
Hmm.
that at the National Portrait Gallery in November
Hmm.
last year. And during that time, you know, I guess one of the challenges, and I can come to that a little bit later as well, is obviously launching a product as in the collective and also a program at the same time. That doesn't not come without its challenges as well,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
you're kind of dependent on each of those two components as well. So that was perhaps one of the challenges that we faced. But what it meant is that it gave me time to really build those relationships and have momentum. And I think there are key things that got us to the stage of launching at the National Portrait Gallery, and that was obviously having those pool of prospects, the potential community at that point of the collective that we hadn't made any asks of, but who I knew were in a position where we could make those financial asks, and then
Hmm.
because I'd got them to a really good point in the relationship journey, I guess. And
Hmm.
so when and another key component, again, I think it's important that I mention this as well, because it's where we've been really successful and really fortunate as well, is bringing senior volunteers on board as well within that collective. So not just potential members, but again, going back to the points where, the enthusiasm and the passion and people wanted to get involved, they wanted to
Hmm.
do more.
Hmm.
And again, most people, yourself included, will know how senior volunteers play a key part in philanthropy as well. So we have those on board in order for them to open up their networks, to do events. And so in the lead up, in those 18 months before we got to the official launch, we were having like smaller gatherings. Now that just might be 2 or 3 people at a breakfast meeting, or
Okay.
going out for dinner. But, some of those gatherings were some of the founding members of the collective. So we had a young artist who had an art gallery in Carnaby Street, and, she was quite she's a young entrepreneur, maverick, spoke about her own lived experience during COVID, during lockdown, body image, she had a huge following on Instagram. So she had the target audience for us in terms of a younger audience, who kind of the
Hmm.
potential beneficiaries of the program that we wanted to help. So she was perfect. And, she held a small gathering, her gallery, did some artwork to represent the program and the collective and, what we were aspiring to. So we had all these touch points leading up to. So what it meant is that this community were constantly coming together. They
Okay.
themselves were building relationships as well. So, and I mean that sincerely, that we, to this day, they've become good friends, they were sharing
Yeah.
ideas all the time, all of these, they were constantly giving us feedback. And, when we were valuing their input, believe me as well, because the type of people that we're working with, get invited to this type of thing all the time. They get asked to be joined at,
Hmm.
these kind of
Yeah.
collective events and stuff, so we had to give them something unique. And again, the selling point for us, I think, was around the program and some of these lovely events that we were able to host through our senior volunteers. But just going back to the point on the senior volunteers, I think, at this stage, we've probably got 15 or so strong senior volunteers who are really actively doing some of the work for us here at Mind. So
Hmm.
whether it be that young artist that I spoke about, we've got somebody from, Killick and Co Private Bank in Mayfair, again, who's hosting an event for us, actually, that I just had a planning meeting with them yesterday morning, and they're hosting an
Mm.
event for us in May,
Hmm.
next month, which is with Women in Mind, the professionals. It's almost branching off from this collective as well, so we're continuing to grow
Okay.
the prospect. But we did get up to the. So look, I guess my point being is that, we were keeping momentum going, we were building these relationships, and we got to the launch at the National Portrait Gallery. And there we had, if you like, the official launch of a given circle. And that given circle, we decided, would be a £5,000 threshold, which meant
Hmm.
that the individuals who were going to join and become members would commit to giving £5,000 over a 3-year period, so £15,000 in total,
Okay.
obviously to raise that £2.5 million that we wanted
Hmm.
to over 3 years. So that
Hmm.
was the ask, if you like. That was a call to
Yeah.
action on the night. And I can talk a little bit more about that launch as well, and
Mm.
the success of it as we go through the interview.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, for anybody who's interested, definitely check out your website as well, because there's a video
Mm.
from it, and it kind of features the launch event and some of the amazing figureheads you have involved in it as well, which I'd love to kind of
Mm.
hear more about why
I
you
think,
kind of chose certain
yeah. Mm.
prominent faces to be a part of this initiative, but it's I think you really get the essence of what the kind of collective is doing. And I think, in this conversation, it's really interesting, I guess, how quickly you've been able to build this. And I wonder, um, I guess around the women in philanthropy piece, what do you feel like this is different than something you were doing? Obviously, it's more organized and women, and you're hosting very targeted events. Do you feel like you are really starting to tap into a different network than you were previously, or you're starting to have different results that than you may have had before kind of hosting this sort of or convening
I
this
think
sort of
so,
group?
definitely. So we're like it coming into post as well, and again, this is anything you wouldn't have heard before, but predominantly those on our pipeline were white male. That we weren't tapping into any of those female entrepreneurs, business people, and stuff, and mainly for the reasons again that like go back to. I mean, it just wasn't being done.
Mhm.
Again, I think like it's a smaller organization. I think one of the things that we worked with a consultancy firm called Solid as well, and like our we became really ambitious as a team as well. So it was to really aim high, and I'll speak about some of the ambassadors that we got on board. But in order to do this again, like you said, we needed certain components, and they were all lining up for us. We were really really fortunate, and so it meant then in order to reach this target audience with these women, we had a product, we had those events. We then had some like high profile celebrity ambassadors come on board. We had the National Portrait Gallery. We knew the ambassadors, and maybe it's shall I just mention the ambassadors as well that
Yeah,
we
yeah,
got on
that would be
board and how,
great. Yeah.
because I think that's another thing in terms of like in order to make something like this a success is not only to be hugely ambitious and to make sure you have the right team on board, who are happy to keep at that pace as well, and work hard and be excellent relationship managers. But one of the other things that we wanted to do that we did like a brainstorm of some of the kind of like celebrity ambassadors or high profile people that we would like on board with this initiative. And so I think we probably did a brainstorm even maybe I don't know a year ago now, and on that we had like people like Adele, we had Emilia Clarke, who is from Game of Thrones star, Lena Dunham, who's an American producer and film star. And at the time we thought it was so ambitious that we were never going to get them, but we thought, right, we're aiming high. And one of the things that, we've worked again, historically, perhaps we didn't do so well, but we've worked really well with our celebrity team. And Stephen Fry is our president as well. And we know that peer-to-peer asks always work so much better. And we've obviously got a brilliant relationship with Stephen Fry. The celebrity team work with him really well. And we drafted an email to Stephen to see if he would approach Emilia Clarke. We knew he was good friends with Emilia Clarke and also Lena Dunham. And he did, and he's brilliant. He does all of those kind of things. He's more than engaged, and very proactive in supporting Mind. And he very kindly reached out to them, and within a matter of weeks, we had meetings set up with Emilia Clarke and our CEO.
Wow.
She herself has got her own charity called The Same You. She's had her own lived experience with a brain injury, and again speaks very passionately about that. So she's doing some amazing work, and her and her mother were just awarded OBEs actually earlier on in the year for their work to dedication to the support they're given to their charity. So within weeks we had this meeting set up, and this was just in the lead up to the National Portrait Gallery, and she agreed to come on board. Emilia did, and so did Lena Dunham as well. Lena had spoken again very eloquently, passionately, very sincerely about her own mental health struggles. I think during lockdown she did an event for Vogue magazine, and again we'd done our research, and we'd seen how that again it really lined up with the program and what we really wanted, the audience that we wanted to reach. And we got Lena on board as well. So again, it put us in a really, really good position. So by the time we came to the National Portrait Gallery, Lena agreed to be there. She did a speech as well. So again, this was something else that we were able to obviously talk about and publicize prior to the event, which meant then obviously our guest list was super impressive, and people really excited not only just to hear about the program. The National Portrait Gallery had opened after a 3-year refurbishment. So again, we had everything was ticking the boxes in terms of which, all those external things matter in order to get initially your target audience. It's then my job and the people in the team to keep those relationships going. But I think once you've got those key touch points initially, it works really, really well. And obviously the program then and being close to the cause. So that's how we brought that collective that we hadn't really approached, we hadn't targeted, we didn't have on board at mine now. Like, for example, my whole pipeline now is a completely different new audience compared to what I had when I came into post, because we needed to build the philanthropy program and generate new business. And this was the perfect way, and it worked really well.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned or kind of referred to the team, the internal team's role within carrying this forward. And I think, I would be interested to hear how you said something around kind of needing to have that energy and enthusiasm, and having worked with women philanthropists previously and the kind of research that I know around the topic as well. Something that, women do like to be more involved before they kind of do make a gift to the organization. They like to know where their gift is being directed, what the impact is. They will be more involved, which makes them more helpful as far as kind of creating more visibility around your cause and connecting you to other potential philanthropists and volunteers who can help you further your mission. But that can also mean that's a different kind of type of work that fundraisers have to respond to. And I think this is something where organizations sometimes struggle with. Do we do something that's quick and immediate, but maybe longer term might not have the same kind of level of return, but it's immediately a little bit easier and quicker? And so how has your team, I guess, responded to this? And also, how does the program kind of function internally? Is there women prospects, just everyone's kind of fundraising towards it along with kind of other priorities that they might have? Are there kind of core people such as yourself who are exclusively working on with women in mind, or how does that work within your team?
I guess to answer the last question first, is that, currently there's just the philanthropy team, the relationships manager within the team that are, fundraising for this program. So that it's a restricted ask as it is currently. That might change as we move along. We are, planning on opening this up to spreading it across, obviously, to corporates and to other income streams as well. So that's our plan. And we're just working on the proposal to make sure that we can do that, because one of the things, obviously, with a lot of these women that we have on board, they're hugely successful. They're CEOs, they're running organizations, businesses and stuff, and so it makes sense for a lot of their, the corporates that they're running to be able to support us, and and it fits their gender diversity, into so it's really appealing to them from their company's point of view as well. So I think a real win for us is when we can get them on as an individual major donor and also get the corporate support. So we're just looking at that now. And I think to answer some of the other points that you mentioned as well, I think again you have to have an organization and a charity, and in our case that is willing to be patient as well. I think the thing with this kind of thing is that you can't rush it. Your organization needs to know and understand the culture of philanthropy as well, that there are potentially, there are no quick wins. And if you want to have the type of women that we were, approaching on board, invested as well, we had to allow to get this right, not to rush it, and again, so, and I think, one of the key things there is to always be honest and open and transparent with your donors as well at every stage of the way. And like I said, one of the challenges was launching a product and a program at the same time. And, and we've got a responsibility to our beneficiaries as well. That program had to be right, still has to be right as well, around trauma informed. It's a delicate program. It's like, the by its very nature as well, what does trauma informed mean as well? So, we still are working on that as well, and making sure that we get it right, so that the beneficiaries get the right support. And that just meant being really honest and open with the donors. And, for the most part, that worked really well. I don't know anybody who doesn't want an honest and open conversation. Now, that's not to say that, they wouldn't necessarily be impatient, but I think once you gave some context and some background and about why this, this was quite, again, it's a new thing. We were trying to revolutionize mental health support, and break the cycle of trauma. If you explain and, and what your your ambitions are and what the goals that you want to reach, then you're met with understanding, you're met with compassion, we're not fobbing anybody off. This was genuine. This was, we were coming from a sincere place as well, with our motives being in the right place. So I think, that's not to say some of those questions and conversations weren't challenging, but for the most part, I was met with a lot of understanding and also some good advice. Again, like I said, these women are hugely successful. How can I help? How can I support? What could they add to this? How could they make something a bit more streamlined? How could they offer mentoring? And there are all sorts of different things as well. So again, if you go into these things, with an open mind and turning everything into an opportunity and seeing the potential in everything, whether that be a difficult conversation, because most people feel respected and valued as well if you're genuinely asking for their input on this. And so it's worked well for a number of reasons there. But I think it's key to being honest and open. And like I say, some of those donors wanted to see immediate impact. Where is my money? What's it going to do? I want to see 6 months down the line. How many people is it going to help? And so we were able to, give some feedback and, some impact on that. But we couldn't be 100% accurate for the very nature. Like I said, this was still the early stages and stuff. And that's been met with a lot of understanding. I think you've just got to be honest and open as well.
So what would you say are kind of the biggest successes of the group so far?
I think, if I was just to say what's the biggest success, I think the launch event, we'd have to just say it was a launch event.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to share a little bit more about kind of what that entailed?
Yeah, for the launch event, like I said, we had all those key components from, we had our chairman of the board, Stevie Spring, who herself, is been voted one of the most influential women in the country. She's been really impressive, work history, business history as well, how cooperative the board were. Two other trustees, Pippa Glucklick and Alex Jensen, who came on to spearhead the initiative. Two celebrity ambassadors. We also had founding members within the collective. So a few core women who were right there at the beginning as well. So we all of this, and again, allowing to be patient, allowing for this to develop, allowing for it to grow as well, which we had an organisation which was really invested in that, giving us the autonomy to do that, being ambitious, meant that by the time it came to the National Portrait Gallery, we had really probably the best guest list that Mind had ever seen to date, that even potentially that I'd seen across the sector, to be perfectly honest as well. We had no dropouts, full guest list, which again is very rare these days, and some really impressive people in the room as well. So we were so excited by that. Amelia was there, Lena gave a speech, couldn't attend on the night, but she did a video speech for us that we showed. We had some other high profile women, men. We had male allies. By this point, I had some senior volunteers who come on board who were male allies as well, who really wanted to support the work. So, there wasn't anything missing in terms of the launch event, really. And I think the other thing that we were working towards, and it kind of happened organically, and again, we're really pleased that it did, is that, we were really, I guess, modernising philanthropy as well with the help of these women, that, we had a mixture of a younger generation coming through and a more traditional, an older type of philanthropist, with family foundations. And these were, working really well together. And given the fact that we focus on young people as well, this younger, 20s and 30s, the entrepreneurs that we had on board as some of the founding members, we were able to speak really, they were emotionally articulate, emotionally intelligent. They were speaking about their lived experience. They had the target audience, again, modernising philanthropy in the way that we worked and reached audiences in terms of social media reach as well. And I can talk to you more about that. Again, we, tried and tested some collaborations which worked really well, and to the point where when we did do the launch at the National Portrait Gallery, Amelia again did a fantastic speech, again, heartfelt, sincere about her own lived experience, and and highlighting obviously the urgent call to action, why we needed support from the collective to support these young people. But she also agreed, and this is worth noting as well, to do a social media collaboration with Mind. So we interviewed her at the National Portrait Gallery, where she again talked about her passions and for why she was involved. But she then agreed to do a collaboration with Mind on her Instagram page. And Amelia, to get somebody like Amelia on board, she's got 28 million followers. So huge. It's just unheard of across the sector, let alone at Mind. So it was a huge win for us that we did a collaboration with Amelia. And she did that, and I think it went out 2 days after the National Portrait Gallery launch,
Okay.
where she spoke about with women in mind and the support needed. So that was a huge win for us as well. So it's been really open-minded to, looking at
Mm.
new ways of how you create something really special around a giving circle and other ways that you can branch off from that.
And you mentioned kind of a diversify kind of audience, or a new modern kind of philanthropy as well. So what what's on the horizon, I guess, as far as that too? Like, where do you see this going, and who are you trying to target and reach in the future?
So I think, again, this for me, I think is across the sector as well. Is the next generation as well, and what we're seeing increasingly, so even with more traditional foundations, family foundations, and trusts, is, for example, we saw younger members of the family foundations being really influential when it came to the decision makers within the
Mm,
family about,
mm,
where potential 6, 7 figure gifts could go as well. So
okay.
again, it's not to underestimate. And I think, even from my point of view, my generation as well, like, seeing this, uh, younger people again being very comfortable in speaking and being articulate about speaking about, in our case, obviously, which I can speak about, mental health. We saw it a lot during lockdown, and some of those younger ambassadors, and whether it be Amelia or some of the founding members, you can speak so, I mean, really articulate, really passionately, have got audiences that they're reaching. I mean, really talk, touching like hearts, minds, and souls as well, having huge impact that, somebody in
Mm,
my generation is not going to have that impact. So I think this is where you have to be open-minded, like who is best placed to sell our message, to,
mm,
make the call to action. And so, again, with those kind of family foundations, we're seeing those younger members, whether it be 20s or in their 30s as well, saying to their, their parents and stuff like, this is a charity that needs support. And you can never underestimate the influence that has on those decision
sure,
makers. And we're seeing
sure.
that a lot as well. And so I think for us on the horizon is looking at that next generation. We've already got some of the younger philanthropists on board as well, with a lot again are influencers. For the very nature of your life, it's probably worth just saying that, if you are on social media and you've got a platform and you've got those followings, I mean, everything, your whole life's kind of exposed as well. And you can either use that as a positive, but you're also exposed to an awful lot of online abuse,
Hmm.
criticism, and particularly with young women, again, they're being targeted in some horrific abuse, that really is,
Mm,
you can only imagine the effects that that's having. So, and a lot of them then, and we've seen them go on journeys over the last, 12 to 18 months, where they've really turned that round into a positive, when they've, owned their experience around it, to actually, hang on, we've got to stop this. We need to, we're allowed to be business, when we're allowed to use our platform for a positive
mm,
thing. We don't have to put up with abuse. We don't have to put up with,
mm,
online
hmm.
hate, and making a stand against that. And of course, again, if you talk to a lot of younger women that I've been working with, whether it's the youth consultants who work on the program, hugely inspired by that, because again, it's like, who doesn't want to make a stand against, the abuse and that women are suffering, and it can be around, and it can be around the way they look, their bodies, their gender, any kind of form of discrimination that it can take. But when you have those individuals who are, making a stand and speaking up, and again, it has such a knock-on effect, and is hugely inspiring. So, at every level, like I said, for me, the
Mm,
most exciting thing has been, these women are so inspiring to me. They're so passionate
hmm.
about this work, which makes my work so much more enjoyable. But so I think, the focus on the next generation, which, to be fair, we've done a lot of work on already. We've got people involved, and I think we want to build on that as well, so that we can secure income, not just to reach that 2.5 million over the next 3 years as well, but what does year 4 look like? What does year
Hmm.
5, year 6?
Hmm.
Some of the women really, and again, something else that we're seeing with philanthropists is really how they make an impact. How can they leave a legacy? They want to be
Hmm.
doing more. It's not about less as well. When you really get them involved, and you build that relationship, it's like, what impact can I make? What
Yeah.
legacy can I leave,
Yeah.
whether that be anonymously, or or something that they want to be recognized for. But you can be as creative as you want, and as long
Mm.
as you've got the support internally as well, which isn't always easy, but you try with the resource that you've got, you can achieve some amazing things, really.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like there's a couple things that have stood out for me from that. So the piece around, I guess, giving even some of your philanthropists perhaps the tools and understanding about their own lived experience
Yeah.
through
Mm-hmm.
connecting them to this
Mm-hmm.
cause and helping them to then in turn help somebody else. You're then almost educating another kind of audience who have influence and connections and not just for your organization but in the sector more broadly, who can shine a light on mental health and have and encourage that conversation, which is part of what needs to happen in order for things to change and for access to become more normalized and for people to be supported in whatever way that they might need. But then I guess the other thing that stood out to me that you were saying around, next gen having influence on their families. I think that is, as someone who's kind of working in this space around women in philanthropy, I think that's, when we think about inclusivity around how we're engaging different philanthropic audiences, women are almost your kind of first go because that's half of the population. So that's a demographic you need to be targeting. And historically, we just haven't really been doing it. They also have huge influence within a household philanthropic decision making, which has been slightly overlooked, I think, within the sector more broadly. We know that there was some research that came out in the US recently that, 50% of kind of heterosexual married couples, high net worth couples, make philanthropic decisions together. Yet we oftentimes do not necessarily steward the female in that
Yeah.
relationship. We kind of go to the man. Then when you go to the kind of next level of that, then you have the children. And it's like we also, as somebody who's worked in this space, you have philanthropists saying, well, my children are really interested in environmental causes, or they're really interested in human rights or whatever it might be. And that's influencing how the family is going to be making decisions. And we have to, I think, to really be running the most sophisticated philanthropy
Yeah.
programs, we have to be
Yeah.
thinking holistically about who is
Yeah.
influencing, as you would about,
Absolutely.
their financial advisor or who their friend
100%.
is. You need to think about the ecosystem they operate in and how they make
100%.
decisions.
Such a good point. And like I said, we've seen that, we've seen it, with the people we're working with, we've seen it unravel and wow, look at that. And like and I think we spoke about this last time when we just met to have a chat. And I see within my own extended family, about how the children have an influence on politics in the way that they vote and stuff, whether the parents might necessarily, I don't know who I'm going to vote for this year, and then they're literally going to the younger members of the family and then who are having that influence. And you, again, it's like you only need to look around you to see this as well. So I agree. And it's about being open-minded, about being smart, and not being I think this is where you really are modernizing philanthropy as well. It just doesn't fit into this traditional box anymore as well. You've got to, again, it's like, look at the bigger picture. Everything has changed, post-COVID, and you've got a cost of living crisis. We've got, we two of our other strategic focuses, about, supporting those in poverty. Obviously, poverty and mental health are going to go hand in hand. And we're doing some work around our race equity work, to become an anti-racist organization. But, so all of those things are going to go hand in hand. Everything is, intermeshed, and you've got to look at things as a whole as well. But again, you have to, know the audience that you're speaking to, respect, they are smart people as well. Meet them where they are, don't assume anything and let them open up, some might have some what we might consider out of date opinions, maybe, and stuff like that. But actually, if you really kind of, again, take the layers off and you do good relationship building, you'll understand, the vulnerability starts to come through of like, why some of those thoughts are in place, why, and you can start to dismantle or, come to a place of agreement of really, what is it that, our common good and what it is that we want to do for good, in this case, helping young women and trauma and stuff. Like you get to that point as well. So it's allowing for that. And again, I think this comes back to patience. There's no quick wins here. Take your time, don't rush, listen to what these people are saying. Again, they are hugely successful. They're running organizations and stuff. What can they add to this collective, to this initiative, to Mind. One of the things that, and it's probably worth saying, that we, just after the launch that we did at the National Portrait Gallery, we had a senior volunteer, again, who a relationship that we cultivated, who was very happy to host a dinner party at the Connaught Hotel that, you know, she funded. She co-hosted with our CEO as well. So we kind of pitched it in with that we're a listening and learning organization, and genuinely meaning that. And so it gave us the opportunity to follow up with some key conversations that we had at the National Portrait Gallery. So again, you know, we were listening. They gave us feedback. They gave us some thoughts about the event, about the program. And it was a very intimate dinner party at the Connaught. There was about, I think, 8 or 10 women there. But, you know, our CEO put herself in a position where she had, she opened up the floor, the dinner party, to some tough questions, you know, around the program, about not only as a woman in leadership, you know, trying to tackle the whole mental health crisis that, you know, we find ourselves in. How is Mind best placed to do that? But I think when you've got that investment from your exec team, from the leadership team, whether it be our chair or our CEO, who are willing to go, if you like, on the front line to face those tough questions, to respect those women, actually, we're going to invest in you, and we're going to hand over this X amount. You know, it's like, you know, let me see what you're doing with it. Let me see, like, how passionate are you? How invested are you in running this organization? And I think, you know, when you've got that, and somebody willing to be vulnerable as a new leader to do that and perform exceedingly well, yeah, you can't underestimate that. And that's why I said, you know, we've been really fortunate, and it hasn't come to us. We've had to work really hard to do this, and get our exec team, CEO, and our board to trust us as well, to trust us with their networks, to trust us, to put them in those positions, you know, and by us trusting them, they trust themselves to be able to answer these questions. And we don't need all the answers. I mean, that's the other thing. How can anyone have all the answers with something as broad as mental health and the crisis that we face as well? So again, it's about being honest about that and the tough challenge. But what can we do? What can we do to make that support? And you'll find that lands really well with the audience, you know.
Amazing. So you've given so much kind of advice around what you think has worked with this initiative, and things that you would suggest perhaps other people do, from, you know, making sure you have that senior leadership buy-in, having really amazing ambassadors, you know, have a really great kind of offer as far as something that might really, well, that will galvanize people to get involved. So we're coming to the end now. So what would be your kind of key recommendation to an organization that perhaps hasn't really started doing any of this work, as far as kind of being strategic around engaging different audiences, whether that be women, whether that be people of color, whatever it might be? But, you know, I guess we are talking about women mostly in this. So what would be your kind of key takeaway, or your key piece of advice?
I think first of all is, you know, be patient with yourself, and try and have, you know, communicate with your leadership team that, you know, there are no quick wins here. So I think you need to, first of all, establish a culture that this is something that's going to have, you know, you need a plan. You know, it can't be a 6-month plan. You need a 2 to 3 year plan, if not a 6-year plan. You know, you need to be ambitious with your goals. You need to communicate that, you know, and know that not everything is going to work to plan initially as well, and allow for that. You know, we know with anything to be innovative or creative as well, there's going to be certain things that don't work and stuff, but allow for that. There are no failings as such. It's like, you know, there are all the cliches that come into play around learnings and stuff, but definitely have a plan, a strategy, you know, get support, get help. You know, there's some brilliant, you know, consultancy firms out there as well. You know, I would do your homework. We did, you know, I reached out to other organizations and charities, looked at giving circles that were working well. And again, I was met with some really, you know, fab conversations with those who were leading on those, what worked well, what didn't, what to avoid, what to steer away, you know, so you can do your own research on that. You know, women's giving circles, we know, do work well as well. So, you know, so I was having some good conversations, what to do, what not to do, you know, take all that on board as well. You know, be realistic about, you know, your fundraising target, your impact, who can you reach as well. You know, if you're there's no point trying to have a 10 million fundraising target if you're a relatively small charity. You know, be realistic. It's okay. It's fine. You know, start off small, you know, aim to reach that target, you know, and you can even have short term, you know, mid-term, long term as well. Even if you want, what is your 12 months that you want to reach? I don't know, 500,000. And then, you know, how can you build on that, the legacy and stuff. But again, I think, you know, you need a good team around you. You need a good leader. You need a good, you know, and I think that comes with being honest, open, and, you know, communicating as well. Don't be afraid to approach either your leadership, where, you know, your CEO, exec board, and your board of trustees as well. And I think, if you can, even once you've done your research, or give good examples of where it's worked really well, for me, and for us as an organization at Mind, it's been amazing to have the board of trustees, so invested in this and spearheading it and putting their name to it as well. And I think for the most part, they might say different, but they've really enjoyed it, as well, and proud. They came on board literally to be a trustee for, they had a purpose, they had a reason, they had a responsibility, and they had a duty. They wanted to make a difference. So when you're giving them these brilliant opportunities so that they can actually have that impact on the very reason why they signed up to become a board member, then you're helping them fulfill all of those things that what they want to do as well. And I think there's an expectation for them to do some of that work. So don't be afraid of asking. As well. And it can be a bit nerve-wracking approaching, the board or your exec team, but I would say just go for it as well. Be ambitious. Don't be afraid of knockbacks and stuff. But for the most part, I think any ambition can pay off, even if it's only in small baby steps initially. So, but yeah, and look at, what kind of programs have you got in place? What kind of communities? If you can use any community, you can bring any collective together. You can have, like I said, you can have business leaders. We're doing with Women in Mind, the professionals, which predominantly you could focus on the finance sector. It could be men, you could have, again, because we are women, it's a great thing to have male allies on board to support something like this as well. That we increasingly, it's not just a narrative that just, women are having as well. It's like actually, this is really about equality. So there's an opportunity at every stage. And I would always say that whatever appears to be a challenge or a difficulty and stuff, there's nearly always opportunities in that. Honestly, there just is in life anyway, but particularly around something like this. So, yeah, and be modern in your approach. I would say, don't just because something's worked well or that's the way you've always done it, which I think, philanthropy could be a bit stuffy like that. You've got to be much more open-minded. There's different ways we're doing everything now. Like I said, think about social media, think about your audience, think about what they have access to, think about, PR, everything. Everything, just don't be afraid to ask, make the asks, honestly. So, yeah, I think that's probably it. Yeah.
That's amazing advice. I love some of these things you've kind of mentioned in that recap, because I think it's, from my experience in working on these sorts of initiatives, you've touched on, I would say, a majority of the kind of pieces that you kind of need to be thinking about as far as, trialing something new, being patient with it, just kind of being ambitious, going out there, having a strategy in place. I think that, there's different ways that you can approach it. And I'm also interested in that. So I know some organizations tend to, yours kind of formed organically, and then, there's that strategy around it, but you can also have, a little bit more of a strategy, perhaps kind of at the get-go to then really kind of, I guess, drive it forward when you might not have those kind of pieces and those opportunities necessarily kind of banging down your door at the moment. So it's, and then, seeking, advice from others in the sector. That's partly why this podcast exists as well, because I was having these conversations with different people to kind of learn about what was actually happening. And I thought, I should just start recording these discussions because it's, I would have a call with you to figure out what you were doing and then go, this is really useful, I think, for others to hear. So, yeah, thank you for all of that insight and for speaking so passionately about what you do and for being such a huge driver behind such an amazing initiative. I think when I saw it on your website, when I found out about with Women in Mind, I was like, wow, this looks so good. And it does feel modern and it feels fresh. And it seems like you guys are trying to do something different. So huge congrats and all the work that you've done on it so far. And I think it'll be a case study in how we can be engaging more women and more diverse audiences in the UK moving forward. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us. And do stay in touch and keep me posted on how things go.
No, thank you. And I think it's important to say, we have got a brilliant team, from the events manager, who organised. So it's not just me. Obviously, it goes without saying, but yeah, it is really exciting. And you're doing amazing work as well, Alex. So thank you for having me on, staying there. I think, that, putting this and women and philanthropy on the map as well. And I'm seeing more and more of these kind of initiatives and women coming together as well in the celebration and a sharing as well. It's brilliant. So you're doing amazing work, and I'm really grateful to have been here today as well.
Well, thank you, Angela. All right, we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.